I I was always in the middle.
Because Jim Neal's like, yeah, first time he did it, I was like, I went to the middle and I got my butt kicked, and Spracklin just came over to me and said, maybe you should go to the outside.
Yeah.
Right. That's always
No,
Jim's favorite story.
that is like, that is the God's honest truth. Like that's the way the system was set up. It's like you were in the middle, and the top boats always got prior. I mean, it was, and yeah, I was very fortunate that I was always like in that position. And yeah, I don't know how I got there, but I mean, honestly, I don't like, I did what he said, and I just sort of put my head down, and like, and when you're in that position, like it's a little unnerving to be in that position, especially like when you're trying to build a team, because like even Jamie Coven says, oh yeah, Fred and Don, they give them the, we always got the dock first. We always got to do things first, but it was, that's the way it was. And, and once you get there, you don't want to really give it up.
We're just getting the recording
you're spitting
going.
Gold, so I want to recapture that.
Okay. So, I mean, a lot of it too is that, the era that I was in with the diesel guys and stuff, like it was, it was a period of change. It was a period of like, there was a renaissance that was sort of going on with training and with the expectations and stuff like that. And I don't want to, Mike Spracklin was my guy. Like he was the guy who, really in a lot of ways helped Mike Tatey like sort of elevate, because like with us, like there was the training methodology was basically like, a lot of the guys that went on for the next 4 years after mine were basically like, just like, I mean, they brought a lot of that mental, I don't want to say mental toughness, but just sort of like, yeah, we'll do whatever it takes, in order to get to the next level and stuff. And so it was a really fun time, but it was also a time of change too, as far as like with US rowing in particular and stuff. Yeah. So, I mean, and I think like, at first I was sort of like, oh, well, I'm going to be the oldest guy that was on there. But then I saw that there was a couple other guys that you guys had on as well that were, before me, like, and I forget the names right now, but, in 68. And then, the guy
was in 72.
Pete
Pardon?
Raymond.
Peter Raymond.
Pete
was in
Raymond.
72.
Yeah. And I think that was, like their whole story was different, and it's what shapes what rowing is, because, for me, like my time on the national was when Korzanowski got fired, Spracklin was brought in, and it was like, the guys that I trained with were all like, can I curse on this thing?
Yes, you can.
They were basically like, fuck Korzanowski. And ultimately it was basically fuck US rowing. And it was a lot of the guys had sort of led up to the 92 and were sort of shunned off. And a lot of those guys came back. And then in 93, we won a medal. And it was basically a fuck you to the establishment, if you will.
And everybody, welcome back to Fast Friends. We have Uncle Fred Honebein coming in hot before the intro with fuck Corzo, fuck US rowing, and Mike Spracklin's my guy.
Exactly.
Everybody, this is going to be a fiery show, and I can't wait.
But I mean,
get in. No, we're in it. Let's get it, baby.
But I mean, like and sorry to say this, but like we were the black sheep. We were the black sheep of, that 4-year period where Spracklin was here. We were the black sheep. And there's a number of stories that I can can expand on that were basically like, why was US rowing doing this? Why was the establishment doing this when we were trying to represent the United States? And that was, I don't want to say it was hurtful to us, but in a way it was like, all right, fine. You don't want to believe in us. You don't want to support us and all that kind of stuff. I mean, although they did in a way, the NRF supported us more than US rowing did, in our opinion. And that was pretty, it was a great moment of change for US rowing, in my opinion. So,
Fred, this is already incredible. this is already incredible. And
here we go, baby.
I am serious. Like, I think the intro is done. I think we have launched into this show like a rocket ship. Fred,
we already in it?
Oh, we're in it.
I mean, you were spitting fire, so I hit record, and we're gonna have to go back to the beginning. We're gonna have to go back to the beginning, and then get back to.
Steve.
We can go
Steve,
quick.
I appreciate that. Yeah,
we're gonna have to go back to the OG.
Fred, there's no rules. There's no rules, Fred.
And by the way, like, and I was thinking about this earlier, like, it's super cool that you guys are doing this, because there's all these other podcasts and people that have tried to do things, and not to sound too down on them, because I appreciate what they're trying to do, but the fact that you guys have been there and know what it takes, like, you guys know the right questions to ask. You know what I mean?
It means a lot to us.
Yeah, thank you. And that,
appreciate that feedback.
Thank you. Yeah, and I mean, and I think that that's huge in like developing like the higher end of what we want. Like, we as athletes, like, all we want as athletes is that, for the success we want them to get the success, and we don't want them to have the failure that we had. Like in 96, like the failure that we had, like that's what really hurts, and we don't want that for them. We want US rowing to be the best, and it can be. So it's just a matter of a lot of things. So,
well, Uncle Fred, this is why you are high up in my pantheon of rowing gods, is that you've said things like, we are representing the United States. We want it to be better for the generations in front of us. And I think that, one of the first things that we like to get into on this show is, why do you think you're here?
Why do I think I'm here? Well, because I know you, Dan, and I know Luke. And
he sent an email to an inbox that Justin manages.
Yeah. A little late.
Yeah, a little late. I mean, for the
Thanks,
record,
Jeff.
for the audience, Fred sent me an email, or sent us an email in the inbox. It just took me 2 months to see it.
We haven't plugged the inbox into an AI agent yet. It's not attended as well.
I mean, all kidding aside, like, I think all of us have been a part of rowing, and for a long period of time, and it's been so valuable for us. And the big part is for us to tell our story, based upon, everybody has their own story based upon their personal experience and stuff. And again, like what I said earlier, is that, like my group, the Spracklin years are definitely sort of a quote unquote a black hole in US rowing. But as I said earlier, like, it was a big part of like the renaissance of hard training and a bunch of guys that just, to try and like sort of spur forward. Like, I don't want to take credit for the guys that won the world championships 3 years in a row, because that was their thing. But, a lot of what we were doing as far as like on the ergometer and just the training and all that stuff that we were doing at that time really impacted US rowing in a lot of ways, on the men's side in particular, And so why am I here? I mean, just to sort of tell that story and to sort of give a little bit of backstory to how, things got to, in order to push, the guys to 2000 and then the guys to 2004 and for you guys, or for 2008 and stuff, and the successes that you guys had. It was huge. So
No, it was, I think that, in some ways, reflecting back and talking to even some of our brothers in arms from different countries, now that you have that reflection period of a decade to 2 decades from those moments, those really impactful moments, is that 96 era of racing, led by you guys, was really impressive and ushered in the golden age of rowing, where a lot of things did change, not just in the United States, but globally, about what was not only expected of oarsmen, but what oarsmen were capable of. But I think before we even get to those international starting lines and the heat of that type of competition, would love to know where young Fred was before he was the wise Uncle Fred. And when rowing, as Carrie Simmons in her episode talks about, got its claws into you.
So my start was at a club. Well, it was Redwood High School at the time, but now it's Marin Rowing. My start was, my dad and my brother both played basketball. My brother played at Redwood High School as well. And that's what I was going to do. But I was walking with my buddy, Mike Hughes, and I'll never forget this. He was like, "Oh yeah, there's this rowing thing. Let's go check it out." And I'm like, I'm going to play basketball. And then we went, and I started rowing, but like I would row in the fall and then I'd play basketball and then I'd row in the spring. But I mean, like, I had to lie about my weight, because I think I was like 130 pounds, maybe, as a freshman. I was a stick figure. And, Mike ended up not doing it, but then I stuck with it. And I basically played, I did that from freshman, sophomore, and junior year. And it wasn't until my senior year that I didn't play basketball. I just rowed with with the team and stuff like that. And, I had a lot of really good guys around me that went on collegiately to do a lot of really good stuff. And, and I would say even junior teams. So my senior year, there were there were 7 of us that got invited to junior camp. 2 of us got cut. I was one of them. But 4 or 5 of the guys went on and competed in 1986 in the Czech Republic. And that was a huge hit for me, cause I was with my buddies and stuff. And then, seat racing and all that stuff happened and I got sent home, I was the last guy cut, as every junior team athlete is,
I think that was my story too. I was definitely the last one cut. I was going, but I was the last one cut.
I was always,
Dan, you remember it that way, right? I was the last one cut.
I remember you getting cut probably more clearly than you do. Side tangent. This is Fred's show, but I think it's as important as one that you guys getting cut.
Okay, hold on, Dan.
But you guys getting cut.
I'm Uncle Fred right now. I'm taking
higher statistic to make the Olympic team than it is to make the junior team, which is an interesting stat. But go.
There you go.
I was the last one cut too.
Yeah,
I was definitely, but I was definitely I was the last one that got called into the room to get cut. They might have decided to cut me first, but I was the last one in line.
I made it and got last in the Cox pair.
There you go.
Yeah. I was last in line.
It saved your parents some money, right?
Yeah.
Well, Dan, you got some gear though, didn't you?
I did get some nice gear.
Yeah.
I did.
But I
get
mean,
some nice
like
gear.
a lot of it was like, I was surrounded by some really good guys. Tim Ryans, who did some international stuff, and Spencer Cutter, who went to Penn and won some national championships. Matt Dalva, the coxswain Aaron Browning was from our boat, and one of the best coxswains that I ever had. I don't want to say I ever had. Like, he was just really good, but he grew, and so, but like, it was a huge learning experience for me, to go to this camp, and I'd never been to a camp before, and seat racing and all that stuff. And
Where was it? Do you remember?
it was in Princeton.
Okay, so also like flying across the country and
Yeah, so I mean, graduated high school, flew across the country, a few days later, and we were all like, you basically had to bring your bag and because it was summertime in Princeton, like, you brought a sheet, and we slept on the floor up in the in the original boathouse, up in the
tower.
The awards bay or whatever, or the awards area and stuff like that. And it was miserable. It was absolutely miserable. But like, we'd wake up in the morning, we had to do an erg test and, make sure that we were still fit and all that shit. And then we had to, and it was basically seat racing and stuff. And but it was cutthroat. And so within like a week or two, or maybe 5 or 6 days, I was there, and then I got cut and stuff like that. So, it was hard. So went to the Wawa, called my parents, cried, I need a plane ticket home.
Did you get sent with like a calling card, or did you have to drop a couple quarters in there? How did that work?
Exactly. I had to put a couple quarters in. I think actually, I take that back. I think I called my parents collect.
Yeah.
This I just pick up.
I just got cut, and then it was People the funny thing is, I don't know if any of you guys remember this, but it was People Express's Airlines.
I don't
got
remember
shipped
that.
home on People's Express Airlines.
Let's go.
Is that the spirit of the 80s?
Pretty much. Look it up. I think they only lasted like 5 or 8 years or something like that. So.
In a wild question too, because I think it's, you mentioned this is 1986, and you started off hot with just how much the renaissance of rowing is happening, and now it's like picturing this decade, right, from 1986 to 1996, and as we're going to go through the story of how you went from this moment of getting cut to representing your country at home, okay, you saw a huge amount of like rowing technology shift as well. I think because right around then, like, hatchets were introduced, and Concept 2 went from the bicycle wheel to the Model B, which was more measurable, and then quickly after that to the Model C. And so I think carbon fiber started to be introduced versus Kevlar. Like, so I think, one, I want to catch the audience up. Like, usually we do your intro, but you came in so hot we couldn't stop it. But
all right,
Fred is not only a phenomenal oarsman and Olympian, but he has been on the vocational side of rowing as a coach, as a boat rep, as somebody who has helped us athletes in the future as a U.S. rowing liaison, all the way from recruiting freshmen to running an Ivy League Division I program. And really, I think that when people hear Fred talk about what rowing is, he is an expert. And he has a huge breadth of knowledge from all aspects of the sport. And then you've also lived through those technological changes twice. So, like, please go into a little bit of detail of what it was like for you to come from, Princeton to, I believe, when you got cut, you went home and you stayed back on the West Coast and went to Berkeley, correct?
No. I went to Orange Coast College first.
Okay, you did go to Orange Coast. Okay.
I spent 2 years at Orange Coast College. I was not what you would call an exceptional student. I got recruited by 3 schools: Washington State, Oregon State, and Florida Institute of Technology. A good friend of mine, her brother, went to Orange. He rode at Marin as well, or Redwood. At the time, it was Redwood, and he went to Orange Coast College, and then
he kept telling me, because I'd see him on breaks and stuff like that. He's like, you got to go to coast. You got to go to coast. You got to go to coast. And I wasn't really sort of into it, but then I ended up matriculating down there and stuff. So, but I mean, like, to get back, like when I was a freshman in high school, the coach, Bob Cummins at Redwood, who started the program, he was this Scottish guy, and he was awesome. Like, loved the man. And what he would do is, like, we'd all go down to the dock, and then he would tie we had these wherries, and then he would tie a rope onto the wherry, which is, just was a wide, that wouldn't flip over single. And then you'd basically row out 20, 30 strokes, and then he'd pull you back in, and then you'd row out 30 strokes, and he'd give you little pieces of advice, and then he'd pull you back in, and maybe do that 3 or 4 times, and then next guy, off you go, and then it was just, there was always this progression, but he always had this element of learning sculling first from Scotland and stuff, because that's how he was taught. And then it was sort of, then there was this evolution. And at the time, there were these, we had boats from Berkeley, like we rode in the Golden Bear, which was this, this wood pocock thing and stuff. And so the way it would work is you'd show up at the boathouse and you'd put the oars out, and it was all very regimented. And then the coxswains would come out with this tub of, and this is absolute truth. They would come out with this thing of Vaseline, and then they'd have these little paintbrushes, and they'd paint the oarlocks, or the guides of the oars with this Vaseline. And then as soon as they were done with the 8 oars, you'd walk them down, and then we'd go get on this 250 or 800 pound boat or whatever, and then we'd haul it down down there, and we'd put it in. And the varsity guys, there was this whole hazing thing, which was super fun. And we'd put the boat in, and brass oarlocks and all that stuff, and then off we'd go, and we'd go do our thing and stuff. But then it was a big deal. We got a Pocock 8, and I'm trying to remember when. I think it was my junior year, but it was sectionalized in between the 4 and 5 seat, because it would fit on the top of a van. And then we'd go off to races, and then everybody would row it, basically, like the varsity, the JV, the women's team, everybody would row the same boat. And yeah, it was pretty cool. Like, the women would row in the morning at that time, and the men would row in the afternoon. And because that's just the way it was at the time and stuff. And yeah, I just sort of accepted it as part of the whole deal and stuff. Is it right at this point in time? And no, it wasn't right at all. Like, and things have changed and evolved so well that, rowing has become so, in a good way, has become so balanced as far as men and women, or you could argue it either way, but I think it's more balanced, especially like, 1986, like, the women, there's no way they were going to row in the afternoon. Like, we were rowing in the afternoon. And, as kids, you were like, why is that? And then, but it was just because of equipment and just the way it was at that time. So, yeah, but it was fun. It was all the spoons and stuff. And then hatchet oars didn't come out. Like, I moved to Philadelphia in the summer of 92. So August of 92. And that was right after the hatchets came out. And there was still this whole, are the hatchets better or not, And so, like, I rode most of the first few months in Philadelphia at Penn AC with spoons. And then it wasn't. Go ahead.
Isn't that controversy like still going on? Wasn't there like an Italian woman or Swiss sculler? Yeah, the Swiss sculler.
She was running with tulips. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it's so interesting to talk to different coaches about like aluminum riggers versus carbon riggers versus the bow mount riggers. I mean, you guys know it. It's just like, it's all over the map. It's crazy. And rigging is just like where rigging is now. It used to just be 83 and a half, 113, you know, on it with an 8.
That's still where most fast boats go.
Absolutely. But it's like, you know, then you have like the fat 2s or the this or the that. And you're just like, I don't friggin' know like what's best. So,
You know, but
it's
like,
crazy.
I mean, Fred, I think like the Buffalo Bills, which I'm a rabid fan of, they had an old offensive lineman guy by the name of Joe DeLamalure, who was a member of the Electric Company, which was the offensive line at the time that you know O.J. Simpson ran behind. So they called them the Electric Company because they turned the juice on. And he always liked to say, he would say, I've never seen a jockey win a race. You got to go out and get some horses, right? Like, and it's basically like what you're saying is like, you guys had some fun, but you guys had the horses, and with all the equipment evolution and everything, you know, like that's the fun part, is when you got the horses to, you know, just compete.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, and you know, my senior year, the high school 8 we had a lot of really good guys, obviously, if like from what I just relayed to you. And, you know, there were some juniors that were in there as well. And I'll never forget, like, Berkeley High, they got some parent or something bought I think it was a Casper, but it was like clear and stuff. But it was like, oh my God, they have this Casper. Holy shit. What are we going to do? You know? But it just motivated us, you know, it motivated us. We're like, well, we got to get a little bit better and stuff. And so like, there was a group of us that we would, you know, like it all became about us. And like we, you know, like Tim Ryan and Spencer and Tim's brother Donald, like they would ride their bikes, and they lived a little bit further out than me, but like then I'd ride my bike up, and we'd ride our bikes to, you know, to school, and then we'd ride our bikes to practice, and then as soon as practice was over, we'd go for a ride and then come home, you know, just to get more fitness and stuff like that. And so, you know, it became our mission rather than, you know, the coach's mission and stuff, which was really cool. It was really fun to be a part of.
So you said you moved out to Philly after college, right? Was there anyone who was like,
I took 2 years off, a year and a half or 2 years off. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, hold on. Before you get to Philadelphia, you go to Orange Coast first,
Yes.
and then you
Then I went to Berkeley.
Right.
Then I
okay.
then I transferred to Berkeley.
Well, but historical context too. I think Orange Coast was still very relevant at producing pretty stellar oarsmen for junior college, and that didn't really start to go away until like 2003, 2004. I think at that point, that's when it started to shift, like the IRA. But Coast was known for developing really strong oarsmen, and if you got to that transfer, you knew that person was coming in to make a difference in the boat.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a number of guys that came up through Orange Coast in my time at Cal. So yeah, it was just a known thing that every year there was the potential of a new guy coming in that you just had to be aware of because he's coming up from Coast.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like, I was in a really good, like at Orange Coast College, like we won the Pac-10s as freshmen. We were second behind Washington, you know, in the JV event. But like we won San Diego Crew Classic 2 years, like my 2 years, so my freshman and then my sophomore year or JV year or whatever. And it was really cool. It was a super fun place to be. It was perfect for me. Like I just needed somebody to kick me in the ass and say, hey, you know, you can do this, you know, like
I thought I was a dummy compared to some of the guys that I was in high school with, and I went to Orange Coast College, and then it was like, it just gave me confidence, and that was because I was a late bloomer in a lot of respects. And that place just, it changed my life. I mean, we went to Henley, like, and it was awesome. Like, it was super fun, and a lot of really good guys that I'm still really good friends with and stuff. Yeah.
Is Mark Batchelder in that boat?
No,
Mark, okay.
no, not that. I don't know that name. So.
Yeah. He was somebody that coached at Newark River, and I believe he went to Orange Coast, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
but being
but
being a 2-year school, there's just so much turnover in class. So
yeah. And that was the thing about it that was very different, is that you only had 2 years to really develop. And so at that, my time, Jim Jorgensen was the freshman coach and Dave Grant was the varsity coach, and Jim was really good at motivating people and like getting them to learn how to train and just how to, like, really get into it and stuff, and the love of the sport. And then Dave really sort of, not that Jim was a bad technical coach, but Dave really knew how to, like, teach technique and the pickup of the water and all that kind of stuff. So, like, I sort of had the best, like, sorry, I'm sort of getting off on a tangent, but like, Jim Jorgensen was the guy who really taught me how to train, or that there was more in me than I knew that I had in myself. And I attribute him to most of my success because, as a freshman, like, here I had gone to junior camp, I had been a part of this team and stuff. And so I just sort of assumed that I was going to be this guy who was going to be in the freshman boat, and but I couldn't run. And at the time, running was a big part, like, erging wasn't a big part of training. Running was, lifting was, all these other activities were. And I'll never forget, like, my fall of my freshman year, we had our sort of end of year, he had our individual meetings with all of us and stuff. And he's like, "Oh, so where do you see yourself?" And I'm like, "Well, I feel like I'm, good for the freshman 8 and all this other kind of stuff." And Jim's like, "Well, the way you're running right now," because we'd run stadiums every Monday and stuff like that. And I was like, that my opinion was, of myself at the time, was, it was a no-brainer. Like, I'm in there. And Jim was basically like, "No, with the way you're running, like, you're near the last, you're near the end and blah, blah, blah." And I was just like, "Really?" And then that's when I sort of had the come to Jesus meeting with him, where it was like, you got to pick up your running and get your fitness better and blah, blah, blah. And so all over winter break, like, so my parents at the time lived on this golf course. And so what he told me to do was to sprint a hole, jog a hole. And so, like, I'd get up at like 6:30 in the morning or whatever, and I'd get out there and I'd sprint a hole and I'd jog a hole, sprint a hole, jog a hole. And I just kept doing that all break. And then I came back and I was like near the top of the list of the guys that were running. There were 2 guys but those jackasses were like 100.
So the late
Luke,
he was one of those little loop guys.
Did you sequence
the late bloomer blooms?
Did you sequence it that the sprints were on the par 3s and the jogs were on the par 5s?
Okay, so I'm not a bright guy. It took me about 2 or 3 weeks to figure out where the par 5s were and where the par 3s were.
Got it.
Why is my sprinting taking longer than my jogging?
Yeah.
So when you get to a par 5 and you have to sprint it, it's a bitch.
Yeah, it's a long way.
It was the best
training,
training.
Well, Fred, were you always wired that way, or was that the unlock? And the question of how you're wired, meaning you thought you had it figured out, you were told you didn't, you were told where your weakness was, and instead of retreating from that weakness, you made the decision like, okay, as Dan says sometimes, it's really simple what needs to be done, but simple doesn't mean easy. So have you always been wired that way, or was that the unlock to, I'm going to do exactly what I'm told, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to see what happens? And was it that moment when you came back that was sort of the aha moment of like, oh, if I do this, then that?
Great question. That was totally the unlock for me. That's where like I just evolved as like, that was the turning point of me being just sort of like, yeah, I'm just going to do this or whatever, to shit. Like, I'm not going to make, like, there's a chance I'm not going to make the top boat. So I got to get my ass in gear. And, you know, like, and I liked the guys that were in the top boat. And so like, I wanted to be with them. Like I wanted to party with those guys, you know? And so, yeah. So indeed, Luke, that was really the turning point in me from being sort of just an athlete that was just sort of going to do it, to where I was like, I got to take it to the next level and stuff. Absolutely.
That's really cool. I mean, it's a similar line of, you know, when Wyatt walked onto Virginia, he said that the first thing he would realize is that he could really see a measurable improvement on the erg, which was, he thought like, okay, I can do this, right? I can get on this machine and I can improve on it. And obviously he wound up being one of the fastest ever.
Yeah, right.
With that way. And I think it's really cool to see those unlock moments. And like piggybacking on Luke's question, and that is, you know, as you started to learn what training was, and that took you into your, you know, that freshman win, which I think has to be pretty amazing to be Orange Coast and winning the freshman 8 at the IRA.
No, it wasn't the IRA. It was the Western Sprints.
The Western Sprints. Okay.
Yeah.
So, but did you guys go to, like, at that point, were you going to the IRA, or was it?
We went to the IRA and we ended up getting 7th, I think.
Which I think is still pretty impressive considering you're a junior college and you have this group of guys that you're coming up with, but there's only that short, you know, like that kind of blows my mind, which is, it's more similar now probably to what the modern transfer pool is, where athletes have that ultimate choice where if they want to switch after 2 years, but you kind of had to make that decision. And so with that new attitude towards training, and put it then into your second year at Coast, and knowing that there's a timeline, right? I think that's the part that I'm really intrigued about. Like, you guys know that at the end of that second year at Coast, you have to make a decision. Did you go into that sophomore year with Cal in mind, or continuing on, or is it something that evolved over that sophomore year?
No. So junior college guys are a little different, you know? No, like
Fred.
And I say that with utmost respect for all of my junior college brethren, but we all say the same thing, you know? You know, no, like, I mean, for us, we were all living in the moment. We were at Orange Coast College, you know, and we wanted to do the best that we could there. Like there was a brotherhood there, and there was like a really cool environment there, you know, especially when I mean, at that time, like Orange Coast College, like they won the freshman 8, and I think in 1980, and you know, the guys who were in the JV boat, they ended up getting 3rd at the IRA. My freshman year, like we ended up 7th or 8th or something like that, and they ended up 3rd, you know? And so like, it was basically like, you know, I mean, like we all knew we were going to move on, but we just didn't really know where. And so like, I looked at Brown, I looked at Cal, and I looked at Washington. Those were the 3 that I looked at and stuff. And for me at that time, there was the dollar amount that was really sort of important in that regard. And so being a California resident and going to Berkeley and, you know, getting in and it being as cheap as it was at the time was a really big, it was a push. And UCLA was another one, because at that time, Zen and Barbara was the coach there, but he said something that pissed me off, and I didn't want to go row for him, so.
What did you say?
What?
Yeah,
What did he say?
It's quite a
I
cliffhanger.
I don't remember. I mean, that was Zenin. Like, he was this Polish guy, and he spoke from, he called it from the hip, and he just said something, and quite honestly, like, I grew up in Northern California, and there was the whole Northern California, Southern California thing, and I didn't want anything to do with Southern California. I wanted to get back to Northern California. Hindsight's a wonderful thing. Washington would have been a better place for me, I think, at the time, because Cal was sort of rebuilding and doing stuff, but I had a lot of buddies there, and I thought I could at that point in time, I thought I could impact more than I did. So, yeah.
So Berkeley got you to the next 2 years of school and
Yes.
rowing, right? And based off your enthusiasm of describing it, of wish I went to Washington.
I ended up leaving the team
Okay.
like my senior year. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. So, and I think that, like, to me, but I love the fact that you're willing to share those scars, because I think it's important. Like, your first two experiences from what you describe at Redwood and Coast, and it really ties into like the Fred that I got to meet as a mentor, is you very often talk about the brotherhood. And very often, I think, when I talk to any of our alumni of the camp system, and hearing your description of like, yeah, you guys really did create the American camp system, is that when you're done, you just miss the guys. Right, going fast. Right, you miss going fast, but going fast only happened because you had the right guys around you.
Well, I mean, as you guys know, like, I mean, going fast is not just about, especially, in any time, like, there's an element of team camaraderie. There's the coach that sort of creates that, like Luke, what you experienced with, like, Craig was just sort of like this us against them type of guy.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, the coach at Cal at the time, Bruce Bell, like, I think he's like, physiologically, I give him full credit for where I got to because of what we were doing my senior year. What I don't want, like, and I don't want to put it all on him because that would be unfair, is that, like, there wasn't this sense of, there wasn't a lot of cohesiveness of the guys, and I think that's a big part of coaching, and is to sort of get the guys sort of together and moving in the right direction, and I think, guys like Mike Tatey does a really good job of that. And, a lot of different coaches have their sort of methodology that they use for that kind of thing. But Bruce didn't have that. Like, there was an element of, and I don't know where he was in his personal space, but like at that time, it was like the inmates were running the asylum and stuff. And there wasn't a lot of like holding people accountable and stuff like that. And myself included, I'm absolutely guilty of that, of not being right for him in what he was trying to do and stuff. And that's a hard thing as a coach. Like, you have to really, that's the development that you need in order to get everything absolutely right for the time that you're there. And I mean, Gladstone was a friggin' genius at that in a lot of ways, like, and a lot of other coaches too, but like, he sort of comes out as a person who could really do that in a lot of ways, in a lot of different environments, which is just friggin' unbelievable, So, and so, like, for me, like, by the end of or not the end, but by the middle of my senior year, like, I had broken 6 minutes on the 2K, which was huge. I was doing all this
stuff that was just, physiologically, just like at that time was really impressive. And it just wasn't coming out with our results at all. And other guys too, like not just me, like there were other guys. Like we had a team that had on the ergometer, like we had unbelievable results. I mean, I was at the top, but then there were other guys that were, within like 4 or 6 seconds of me and stuff. And at that time in 1990, that was unheard of,
Yeah, I was just
And-
gonna
No,
ask if you
absolutely.
could put a timestamp on that.
Yeah.
6 minutes in 1990 is pretty unfathomable at that time. I mean, I'll let the rowers talk, not the coxswain, but yeah, I think it's pretty unfathomable at that time.
But I did. Okay. So I did it not just once,
Please
Yeah.
brag.
but a
Big
week later.
bragging.
Yeah, sick, unbelievable. And
Consistency.
so with that, because I agree. I think that's really moving around that era. Were you being like called about the national team? Were you like, this is where I want to go? Like, what got you back into the kind of orbit of, because like, so what happened, right? So and I'm not trying to pick a scar here, but like you left the team.
You teased it. You teased it.
You left Cal, the Cal team, because again, like people don't always jive. It's totally fine. Like whatever. We're not going to get into that. But my bigger piece is like, were you like, I'm done rowing, or I still want to continue rowing? I want to go row a club level. Like where did that kind of?
Okay. I'll give you the quick and dirty of it.
Sure.
Because there's all these. So we had competed at the Crew Classic.
Cool.
We were in the B final, and we got back for practice, and I think it was that week, and there was all this other shit that was going on and stuff. Not me personally, but just other shit. And we went out for a practice, and it was just the same old shit. And I was just like, I'm fucking done. I'm done. And like the guys that were there will tell you, like, I stopped. I just said, I'm done. I'm not friggin' doing this anymore. And like, coach comes over and is like, what's going on? And, the coxswain's like, he's done. Like, he won't row anymore. He's just done. So they rowed us back to the Ebright boathouse. I got out of the boat and took off. And that was it. And I'm like, I'm never doing this again, because it was just so miserable. Like it was just, I mean, I look back on it historically, like it was very selfish on my part, but like I had given my my junior year, there were some ups and downs and stuff. And then my senior year, like I came back and I'm like, I'm giving it friggin' everything. Like I'm putting the head down. I'm just going to friggin' work. And that's what I'm going to do. And that's in a lot of respects why, like, I was able to do what I did on the ergometer. Like I set records on the ergometer for a lot of years. I set records in the stadium at Berkeley. I did all this stuff. There's guys who were track athletes, and it was so funny. I was at a football game, and this guy who I rode, like he was in like the JV and stuff like that, and he was like a state finalist in like the mile or something like that. He was friggin' fast, and I was able to crush him on our stadium runs and stuff like that. But I got to a point where I was just like, I'm just done. Like this is no fun for me. And so like I took about 2 years off.
Okay.
And basically got into a pretty dark place. And then Mark Zemsch, who was a 88 Olympian, Cox in the Cox 4. And my roommate at the time was Dan Allen, who was my coxswain at Orange Coast College and at Berkeley. And basically, I feel like I was set up because I went down to watch a practice with Mark, and a guy was missing. And so I jumped in and like completely out of shape, and I was a drunk and all this stuff.
And then I went out and ended up winning this whatever. And Mark
piece or
pulled me
whatever.
into
Yeah,
his
sure.
office. It pulled me into his office, and he's like, you should really move. Like, you should really give this another go and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so after some hard thinking and stuff, and I was like, okay, I'm going to start doing it. And then I started training and, started running a lot and erging and getting out on the water when I can. And then I was going to stay in Berkeley. And then Mark's like, no, you got to go to Penn AC. And so I did. And so I packed up my truck. I had no money and just drove out, and Ted Nash opened up his doors, and there I was. So yeah, it was cool.
Sounds like 92, 93-ish.
92. It was August
Okay.
August 1992. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. And then it was basically, you're basically thrown to the wolves, and it's like, all right, you got to figure this out.
Yeah.
It was super cool.
What was the conversation like with your parents? Like, were they? What was that like?
Says the college rowing coach.
I'm just so curious. I think it's awesome.
He had graduated college.
Steve, it's a great question, because I did call him up, and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to move to Philadelphia. And their question is, what are you going to do? And I'm like, I don't know. I'll figure it out, and I'll get a job. I mean, I don't want to say I didn't have any money. Like, I had the guy who I was working construction for, like, he was super generous and was like, this guy, Chad Pettigrew, loved the man. He was probably the best boss and the worst boss I ever had. And I'll tell you why. He was the best boss because we would have, like, I worked construction for the guy, and we would have days where he would go, if you want to call in well, you can call in well. I'm like, call in well? And he's like, yeah, if you want to go do something fun, call in well. And I'm like, okay. And so I'd call him up. I'm like, Dad, I'm going surfing. And he's like, really? And he's like, that sounds like fun. I'll see you the next day or whatever and stuff. But the cool thing about it was, like, he knew, like, if he gave you the day off, like, we weren't getting paid, but, like, the next day we'd freaking bust our ass for the guy, like, and do twice as much as what he would expect and stuff. So he had sort of floated me a bunch of money and stuff like that, which helped me out and stuff. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. I think I just got to pick it. I had to pick it.
Wait, hold on, Steve. I didn't answer your question. What did my parents say? They were against it. Seriously. They were basically, really? You're going to go do this? I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go give it a shot. I'm going to go see what I'm going to go see what I can do. And I'm going to give it 2 years. And that's what I'm going to do. So, but I never asked them for a dime. I never asked them for any support. It was basically, I was going to do this all on my own, because I didn't want that baggage over me and stuff. And so I lived hand to mouth. That first year, it was tough. Like, I was making $5.25 an hour at Boathouse Sports. It was fucking awesome.
Yeah. Well, the pilgrimage, right? The cross-country pilgrimage to Penn AC.
That was another story. It was just awesome. Yeah, that was great.
Yeah. Well, the adventure, right?
I knew where I was going to, sorry, Dan, but, like, I knew where I was going to stay. Like, there was a guy out there, Ross Flemmer, who had set me up with some guys. So I knew where I was going to live. It was a flop house on Brown Street in Philadelphia. That's all I knew. But I loaded up my truck and drove out. That was it.
I mean, it's like, I love, like, the phrase, the courage to dare greatly, right? And jump into the unknown and say, we're just going to figure it out, right? Like, it's a skill. The reason why I had to poke at it was just because it's a skill that's sometimes lost on, like, the current generation, right? And it's in some respects missing, to, like, to just say, yeah, I'll figure it out. I'll sleep on somebody's couch. I'll sleep under a pool table for the summer. Right. Like, I had, lunch with Father Tom on Sunday, and, I was just telling stories about, like just picking guys showing up with just a bag and saying, I need some help, and I'll figure it out.
Well,
Right?
I mean, I think that's a lot about, at that time in U.S. rowing, like that was what a lot of us were doing. Like, I mean, my story is no different than, I mean, it's different as far as expanse, but like, my pair partner, Don Smith, like,
Yeah.
like he was the same thing. Like he was just painting houses in Philadelphia, and, Mike Peterson and Will Porter and all the, and all these guys, like they all have sort of a similar story. Mine was just 3,000 miles, of driving cross country. But it was great. I mean, I, like that time in my life, like I loved it. I absolutely loved living like in a rough and tumble neighborhood in Philadelphia and going down to practice in the morning. John Strupback gave me a job at Boathouse Sports, and oh my God, like, I was making nothing, and, biking, like I couldn't even keep my car. Like I had to store my car in this, this fucking random place. And I biked everywhere. Like I would just, I'd go to workout, and then I'd bike to work, and then finish work, and then I'd go back to work out, and then go home and eat dinner. And that was it. It was awesome. Like, and I loved every minute of it. It proved to me that I didn't need as much as I thought I did.
Yeah.
Like I could live on $5.25 an hour and be happy and just doing what I wanted to do. And it was just fantastic. I loved it. I loved that. That year was one of the best years of my life. It really was, because you get something really cool, like bottle of red wine, like a gallon jug of red wine, some spray cheese, and it was the best day ever,
It's like Hoopman with his Doritos and Slurpee.
On crackers or straight from the can?
Oh yeah, well, that was one of our parties. We had a wine and cheese party, and it was a gallon.
But I think that the scene of you packing up your truck, telling your parents that you're going on this adventure that doesn't make sense, and it just kind of really reminds me of, Keel said it really well, is fast rowers like to do difficult things, and Olympians have a sense of delusion, where from doing these interviews now, and I think we're over 30, is that it's almost like the delusion's a compulsion. Like you have no choice but to follow this, right? Like you especially taking the year and a half off, and as much as you self-describes a dark place, there's this something inside you, and you had to have a guide along the way drag you out and maybe set you up, right, to give you that, and even if they didn't, like there just happens to be the empty seat that day, and it's just very interesting, like the kind of cosmic nature to like an Olympian's just born and they're just walking the path until they're there. And your path is, your path specifically, but in this call alone, you have Luke, who made a cross-country trip 3 times in a month for it. Steve and I have both been to Chula and Princeton numerous times. And when you think about it now, years out, and your son's now rowing, and like you married an Olympian, it's like to take you back to that young 20-something and be in that environment and have you describe it as the best year of your life in a lot of ways. Is, I feel the same way, is that but it didn't feel like it was my choice ever. Like making those decisions where everyone's like, wait, what? You're going to like, hey, you're going to go drive cross country with everything you have and go live in a flop house. To most people sounds insane, but that is the path in a lot of ways to prove how bad you want it. And I think it's really cool that you express it so clearly all these years later.
Well, I mean, I never went out there with the sense of making the Olympic team. Like that wasn't the goal. Like the goal was to like, being in sort of a dark place, and then, there was a recession, so there wasn't a lot of money. It's like, what do I got to lose? I can either be poor out here or I can be poor out there. It doesn't really matter, so I might as well go try and do something, something that's fun and something that, was really important to me for a lot of years. And yeah, okay, there was a hiccup in the way and stuff like that. And, and Annie, my wife and I, we sort of always had the same perspective of it wasn't about making the Olympic team. It was just seeing how I just wanted to be better the next year, and then be better the next year, and then be better the next year. Like it wasn't like, and like the Olympics was always sort of in the back of my mind, but like I never thought I was going to make the Olympic team. Like that wasn't what drove me across country. It was just sort of like, okay, like I was good at this, but let me see how good I could be. And if I'm the spare, or if I make, Cox 4, or, not to degrade that or whatever, but like whatever I make is going to be great, or if I just go and row at the Canadian Henley and stuff, like it was just to sort of see how far I could take it and stuff. And, by sheer chance, it was just like I got lucky in a lot of the respects of just being at the right place at the right time, like Don Smith and I, like when we got in the pair together, oh my God, it was like magic. And it just went, and it was awesome. And we ended up being really good for 4 years, but that wasn't the expectation. And, it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to go out and meet this guy and we're going to get in a boat and we're going to go fast. And that's that. It was just, so there wasn't really a plan. It was just, I needed a change in my life, and this was going to be the change. And I just wanted to, like I had done some things physiologically that were exceptional, and I just wanted to see where it was. But I had no idea, especially at that time, like there wasn't, they'd post scores on US Rowing's website and stuff like that. But like, there were the Harvard guys, which were always sort of put on a pedestal, and the Yale guys and the Princeton guys, and, Northeastern, and, and stuff. And so like, I never thought that I would be better than any of those guys, like, I mean, I can't even think of the name right now, but I that wasn't part of the plan. Like, I'm going to go out and kick these guys' ass. It was just basically, I'm going to go out there and just see what I can do. And that was it. And just train and get into it and stuff and have fun. And that was sort of my deal. So
yeah, there's like two threads that through the interviews that we've done that kind of resonate, and kind of piggybacking off what Dan was talking about earlier with the, speaking with Akil. And he was like, rowers love to do hard things. And then he paused. And he's like, well, hold on. Great rowers love to do hard things. And so your journey is so much in embracing that, right? There's almost a giddiness as you tell this story of like, I drove across country. I had no money. It's hard enough as it is. I'm living in this house in, a rough and tumble neighborhood. That'd be tough as it is. Worked at a company, made no money. That's tough. And then I was training at a really high level the entire time as well. And that was tough. And look at you now, like smiling about it. And everybody here is smiling because it resonates with this room, right?
Yeah.
It resonates with everybody on this call. So that's one thing. And then the other thing that we're constantly seeing in the interviews, and you speak to it right now, is for some of the athletes, sure, it was like, I'm going to be an Olympian. And for others, it was kind of an abstract idea until it became a reality. But the common thread is that everybody just got lost in the process, and it became about the daily improvement. And so this group talks a lot about high improvement behavior over high performance, right? It's high improvement for better outcome, as opposed to just, this is the goal and this is the target. And so you're talking about this really hard experience that you thoroughly enjoyed, matched with each day I'm going to go out and get better. Each day I'm going to find a way to get a little faster. Each day I'm going to find a way to get better. And that, to move cross country to there's like a purity in what you're talking about. I moved cross country not because the plan was to be at Penn AC to then springboard me onto the national team, onto the Olympic team. It sounds to me, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, and I hope this is a good springboard for you, but it sounds to me it was just sort of like, I have unfinished business. I need to figure out how good I can actually be at this thing. And it's almost like am I right? Am I right about how good I can be at this thing? Or was it simpler than that? Or was it just you needed a change? Like what was it?
It was, I needed a change. I needed a change in environment. I needed a change in my goals and direction. You know, I still some of my best friends, you know, like, so in that quote unquote dark period, like I was playing really hard. Like I was working construction, and then, you know, I'd go out and party, man. Like, and I was partying hard and stuff. And at one point I was like, I got to reevaluate this in a way. And then it was just sort of serendipitous that, you know, I went down and, you know, cause Dan Allen was he was the assistant coach, and so he was like, oh, you got to come watch a practice. And then somebody wasn't there, and I just jumped in. And I mean, like, I was working construction. I wasn't training, but like, you know, so I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll jump in. It'll be fun, you know, and got blisters and all that stuff and everything. But, you know, I ended up like winning the whole matrix thing or whatever and stuff like that. And that's when Mark brought me in and was basically like, you know, you, for just doing what you've been doing. So maybe there was a conversation that Dan and Mark had, and it was like, you know, Fred's on a destructive nature and stuff. Let's try and like divert him a little bit and stuff. I don't know. Like I, you know, that's never been relayed to me as much as I've talked to Mark and Dan, but, you know, it was basically like, you know, you could do something with this, and, you know, you should give it a shot. And that's what I did. And I, you know, obviously I don't regret it, because it really opened a lot of doors for me, and it was really, a good opportunity and stuff. And the time, you know, like, I think everybody, and sorry to get on a tangent, but timing is everything, you know. And for me, like, you know, Korzeniowski was the coach through 1992, and then the U.S. team had sort of a rough go of things and stuff. And, you know, it was sort of funny. Like, so my friend Dan Allen, he started to be the Danimal, as Steve might know. He was an assistant coach up at Princeton, and that's where the, you know, like Tatey and a bunch of guys were still training and stuff. And so he said, hey, they need a port. You know, do you want to come up for the day? And I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll come up and do a couple rows or whatever. And so I did. And, you know, Corzo basically, like, later I heard that he had said that I would never make it or whatever and stuff like that. And, which sort of seems to be the resounding theme and stuff. And I bet you he would, as much as I love Corzo, he would probably deny it. But anyway, like, and so
he was Tyler Durden. He was bipolar, so he'd be like,
you're
no good here.
And then just he says it to everyone, where he's like, I say that to everyone. I say that to everyone.
Yeah, but nobody, I mean, like, for me,
nobody
like,
is good.
I got up there, and basically here I am in the 8 that was like, you know, most of the guys from the 92 team, and I was just this random dude, and I just fucking pulled as hard as I could, you know, the whole time and stuff. And John Parker told me later, he's like going, yeah, it felt pretty good when you were in there. So I'm like, okay, maybe I had some.
Who is this Fred Honebein?
Yeah, who is this guy? It's fucking bullshit.
Who is this Penn AC?
And, you know, like, I think you led into it, you know, kind of gracefully a little bit, right? Like at Penn AC and that time, you know, you were saying, yeah, like there were a bunch of Harvard guys and Yale guys and Princeton guys, even though I'm pretty sure at that point Princeton wasn't that good. But like, you also had a big cohort of like Rutgers guys who were like F those guys. Let's go, right? Like you had Jeff and Bob coming in, right? And
Well,
Will and
I mean, if we sort of are moving on to the 93 year when Spracklin took over,
Yeah, sure.
Jeff and Sean and Jim Neal weren't really a part of that group in the beginning. Like they rode with Tom Bohr in the straight four in 93. So the 93 group was basically a lot of guys that were either cut or shipped off by Korzanowski. And I was sort of the new guy that came in. And so just by, I mean, and I said this earlier, like Don Smith and I, like, and I don't know, did you, any of you guys row at Penn AC or any of those clubs?
like Vesper. I was Vesper in the early 2000s.
So basically the way it worked is it was basically like a middle school dance, right? Like you'd sort of stand on the side and then be like, hey, what side do you row? And they're like, oh, I row this side. And you're like, hey, do you want to go for a row? And, you know, and then you'd sort of go, you know, you'd go row with people. And so there were a few of us that were there. And then, you know, Don Smith was rowing with this guy, Jim Pugh, and they were pair partners, and they raced it at Henley in 92. And so Don and Jim were sort of like, they were a couple. And so like, you know, you couldn't really infiltrate that, but Jim was injured or something like that. And Don was down there and so, you know, and I was just, I mean, honestly, like I was just going down there and I would go out in the single. And then if somebody was a starboard was available, like I'd go out for a row with them or whatever. And then Jim was out. And so Don and I went out for a row, and it was just like, it was magic. It was unbelievable. Like at that time I was keeping a journal and stuff, and it was like, it was sort of stupid. It was like, I had the best row with Don today. It was so awesome.
That's awesome.
He's so
That's
dreamy
awesome.
and all that
That's
stuff.
so cool. That's so funny.
And then, but I mean, he had the same thought. And so like, you know, he had to find a way to sort of.
Did he write it in his journal?
I don't know if he did or not. So he never told me, bastard.
We'll have to ask him one. We'll have to ask one this episode.
But you know, he had to find a way to sort of move from Jim to me, and we ended up winning pair trials that year. And then there was a 4 that was Will Porter, John Brown, Tom Murray, and Mike Peterson and Steve Sagaloff. And so after trials, Spracklin, we went out, and we all will remember this the same way, but like we went out to the Olive Garden up in Princeton, and he asked us to decline and to go to the 8 camp. And he said to us, like, I can't guarantee that you're going to make it, but my job is to make a fast 8. I'd like you guys to decline your automatics and come into the 8 camp. And so like, it was this whole like rigmarole about that kind of stuff and everything. And so, but like going back to your point or to your question, Steve, like these were all guys, like, so I was the new guy, but a lot of these guys had all been around for like the selection with Korzanowski and stuff. And these guys had big chips on their shoulders, and they were just basically like, F the system. Like they hated, you know, Korzanowski, they hated US rowing. And so I was just like, yeah, okay, I'm with you guys. And it was a big part of that first year for us. It was basically an FU to, you know, to the system. And, you know, other things that are sort of rolling around in my mind, like we went to this race. So we went to Duisburg, which they didn't have the World Cups at that time, but they had these international events. And so Duisburg was one of them. And we were the American 8 that was going to Duisburg. You know, we went through some sort of selection process and stuff. And so it's like, we made this boat and we were like, okay, we're the US team. We're going to go represent the United States. And US rowing didn't give us any sort of like gear for that. And so we went to an Army surplus store. We bought white t-shirts and we bought these little US American flags. And this is no BS. And we sewed the flags onto these white shirts ourselves. And we raced in those things. And it was the coolest shirt that, I mean, I don't have it anymore because it all disintegrated and stuff like that. But like, we were like, but that was sort of like our thing was basically like, F the system. We're like, we're going to do this and they don't need to support, like they were supporting us in a way, but we didn't want like, it basically turned us away from the support of US rowing and stuff like that. And there were a couple other incidents as well that happened along the way. But that was like the big one for us where it was like, these people aren't supporting us. And we have, you know, and it's a small thing, right? Like a racing jersey, or at that point it wasn't, you know, it wasn't the unisuits and stuff like that, but it was like, you know, and mine was like this, you know, it was
it was waving. It was waving and it was waving in the wind.
Yeah, exactly. It could have been and stuff.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, we were basically like all these guys were anti-establishment, and we all got to be this anti-establishment. Like, all right, we're going to do it, and it just gave us this motivation, and maybe it was something that Spracklin did. I don't know, but like it made us just like so friggin' hungry just to like, all right, we're going to show these people what we're made of and stuff like that. So it was cool.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of things that resonate that are across multiple generations. And I think it's always tough to look at any administration or governing body and what it's doing versus what athletes are receiving. And I think that, you know, it can be an issue not just with U.S. rowing, but other NGBs underneath. Like, I think it all stems from, you know, we're one of the few international Olympic committees that doesn't have government funding, right? So if we start there, we can just see how trickle down can happen quickly. And then there's always the assumption that every rower is a trust fund because somebody on U.S. Rowing's board of trustees is a trust fund person. They don't really put two and two together that 50% of our Olympians are not Ivy League prep school trust fund kids, right? So there's always this disconnect. But I think the other really kind of incredible thing of when you talk about anti-establishment is that up until that point, you know, talking to John, you know, to Twig, you know, you have the Corzo effect for a while. You know, Corzo had been through several cycles. So there's huge disruption and lack of belief in the organization. You know, new coach, Spracklin comes in with an entirely new approach to training, like you said. A lot of vigor, and you're talking about this is like late 90s, so the fall of the Berlin Wall. We have literally like Americana pop cultures taking over the entire globe, MTV. You guys are like full in Gen X prime. And the Chula Vista Training Center opens up too, though, right? Like, I think that was a new tool to the arsenal. There's now this Olympic Training Center being built where rowing is going to have its own home versus being shared.
It wasn't there when we first showed up.
Right. You were shipping containers, correct?
You were in shipping containers.
Okay.
Yeah. And it was basically it was shipping containers and, you know, a few hulls and stuff. And so it was down. So where the boathouse is now, it was down another, where we rode out of was like that marina area. Okay. That's where we rode out of. But like
Murder Mountain?
What?
By Murder Mountain, the hill, the good hill to run.
In the corner.
By the dam.
In the corner.
Yeah. It was closer to the dam and stuff.
Yeah, okay.
But like all we had was those shipping containers. We would
get out of the shipping containers. Like we had, like when we showed up there, like the shipping containers showed up, like a trailer was there with the boats. And then we had to build the racks inside the shipping containers. It was extremely rustic. It was, I mean, we lived in, Cobb Hall, which was a, like down, God, where was it? It it was really funny. But it was it was a military base, and that's where we lived. And so we lived in these, bachelor, BOC, the bachelor officers quarters. And so we lived in these rooms. You had your own room and stuff like that with a shared bathroom and stuff like that. But we had to drive, from basically, downtown, San Diego out to Chula Vista. And at that point, like it was basically rattlesnakes and there was no buildings out there whatsoever. I mean, that was it, Telegraph Avenue. Like we'd race like our cars, down that because there was nothing and stuff. It was super cool. Like, and and it was funny as hell. Cause like we'd be at the shipping containers and just hanging out and stuff like that. And, these guys would come across with these Mexicans and stuff, like coming across with their gallon jugs of water, and they'd come by and they're like, San Diego. And we go, just keep walking that way about, 10 miles, and you'll be there and stuff like that. It was awesome. Like it was super cool. So,
yeah. I mean,
T. Murray likes to talk about, like, he always likes to tell the story about having an old beat up car with like very loose springs and just basically the final couple miles bouncing down the dirt road.
Oh yeah. It was I mean, the whole thing was just comedy, it was just, it was like the Beverly Hillbillies, and I mean, just the people, but it was great. And, like, it was super, and then we'd get to the Quonset huts and okay, here we go. And, we'd walk our boats, the quarter mile, and we'd put in the water and we'd go beat the shit out of each other and come back in and then put the boats away and then drive back to Cobb Hall and then go to have dinner with the, with the military people and stuff. So yeah, it was super fun. Like the training center didn't open until after 95. So 96 was the first year that we actually got to sort of reap the benefits of the training center, like the dining hall and the dorms and all that kind of stuff. But so the first year we lived at Cobb Hall. The second year we all had like houses, and so like 4-bedroom houses and stuff like that, like near the community college.
Okay.
I've always heard, sorry, Luke, I just real quick, like I've always heard, Spracklin did his thing of like, okay, faster boats in the middle, slower boats to the outside, right? Hey, how long did it take you to get to the middle? Did you make it to the middle in all that mix?
I was always in the middle.
Cause like Jim Neal's like, yeah, first time he did it, I was like, I went to the middle and I got my butt kicked, and Spracklin just came over to me and said, maybe you should go to the outside.
Yeah.
Right? That's always Jim's favorite story.
That is the God's honest truth. Like that's the way the system was set up. It's like you were in the middle and the top boats always got priority. I mean, it was, and yeah, I was very fortunate that I was always like in that position. And, yeah, I don't know how I got there, but I mean, honestly, I don't like, I did what he said, and I just sort of put my head down and when you're in that position, like it's a little unnerving to be in that position, especially like when you're trying to build a team, because
you know, like even Jamie Coven says, oh yeah, Fred and Don, you know, they give them the, you know, we always got to dock first. We always got to do things first, but it was, that's the way it was. And, and once you get there, you don't want to really give it up.
It's like a very long game of King of the Mountain.
It really is. And, you know, and I don't want to say it's right or wrong. But it really does push people to limits outside of what is possible. And for me, like once you get there, you don't want to give it up. And, and, you know, there were things that happened that, you know, where I was pushed, even though I was at the top, like I was pushed in other ways by Spracklin. And that was his genius in that, like, he saw where you were, but he always saw more, or he always wanted to get more out of you. And so like that was, again, like that was his genius in my opinion, is that he was always trying. And, you know, the top people were trying to make the bottom people faster too, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
you know, like, you know, you're going to have the top person, and the top person has to stay at the top, but the top person also, like, if the top person starts to slow down, then the bottom people are going to slow down too, because there's the whole mental component as well.
Well, because there's two things as well that, from hearing the legends of this training, you know, this training cycle, I think there's really three, because as we go through to the, you know, getting to Atlanta, is one, I heard that it got so competitive to the point where even if somebody got kicked out of the top group, they had to leave the house. Like, so that the competition went off the water too. So I think that's a really intense thing to think about, where like literally you had to go and kick somebody that was your friend out of the house or into the house.
It was brutal.
Yeah. Two, you have I think the Bushbacher was there with the women's team as well. So is it right? So there was
they were in Chattanooga.
They're in Chattanooga. Okay. They were in Chattanooga.
They would come out for training camps, and the Scullers would come out for training camps too.
And that's what I say is then you had the sculling team that was in Georgia. So you kind of had
Augusta.
Three, because which for our era at the begin, like coming into it, we were that culmination of the Princeton Training Center where all rowing was in one place, which we think was pretty cool. And then as we got to 2012, it separated. But I think that's what's wild to me, is that you had these three kind of distinct training groups with these three distinct coaches. And then the third one is, you know, hearing about, always heard this from, like, you know, Tatey was in the mix in the beginning, and then Spracklin basically asked him to coach is part of that as well. So like there's a lot of changing of the guards there. And I just, as we get to Atlanta, if you can illuminate any of those things from your perspective, because I think it's all really impactful to your point of your cohort specifically changed the game from rowing. And I think the reason why I'm bringing this up is that based off the numbers, guys like you pulling sub 6, going to Henley and back-to-back records being dropped to the barrier that stood for a long time, setting the world record at Indy as well, I believe, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so when you talk about this era changing it, and this group of guys and this new coach and an old guard going down, can you take us a little bit into like what those scraps were like? And particularly, what do you think was Fred Honebein's edge that gave you, like, you knew you had an advantage over all these other guys? Your particular edge in this heat.
So yeah, so there was a changing of the guard. There wasn't a lot of guys that came back from 92. Doug Burden came back in 96, but just for that year, just for 96. Chip McKibben and Bob Kaler and Jeff and Jim Neal and Sean Hall. And I'm sure I'm forgetting somebody. But
but it was a different it really changed as far as like what you did on the water was basically what, like, it was all pairs basically, and it was all just basically like, I mean, there was no like, you know, the Korzanowski, and I was coached by Korzanowski a few times and stuff. But like, it wasn't like he'd be sitting there next to the boat going, yes, yes, no, 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 yes, or whatever. Like Spracklin didn't say anything. It was basically we would get in our pairs. Like we were told who our pair partner was. We'd row out to the dam, and then we'd set up, and, you know, it would basically be a V. And then it would be like, okay, this is what we're doing, you know, 18 to 22. And it was 11-minute cycles basically, or, you know, 11-minute pyramids or whatever. And the coxswains would blow the whistle, and that was it. And I do remember, like, Tatey came out. Well, there were 2 times. So in 93, Tatey and Parker were the pair, because Don and I had declined it, and so that enabled Mike and John to go to the World Championships and stuff. So I hold that over Mike any chance I get.
Twig calls them Fifi and Fufu, Corzo's prize poodles. So
I mean, and the thing is, it's just, you know, it was a post-Olympic year, and you know, and I from what I understand, like in 92 and 91, 90, or 92 in particular, like John and Mike were like, they were the top guys, you know? And so, you know, Don and I felt pretty good that we were able to beat them and stuff like that. And, but who knows where they were in the training cycle and all that, you know, training and all that kind of stuff. But, you know, I do remember Don was injured and Mike came out, and he still wanted to row. And I went out in a pair with Mike, and I don't know if he'd remember it this way, but I do remember him saying at one point in time, like, that we couldn't keep the boat going straight. And I was overpowering him, I guess, you know, but Mike, and I don't want to disrespect Mike at all, but because he was like, what, 38 or 40 years old and stuff like that. And I was 24 or 25 years old and stuff. And here I have Mike Tatey in the boat with me and stuff like that. And I sort of wanted to prove myself and stuff. And so, anyway, so that was sort of the changing of the guard in that regard. If that answers your question. But again, like, it also goes back to what I was saying earlier about, we were all a bunch of guys, and I got sort of carried in with them as far as, like, we were anti-establishment. We were guys who just wanted to prove that we were legitimate in a lot of in what we could do as athletes and stuff. There was a lot of really good athletes in that group. I mean, you know, by the time we got to 96, we had, I would estimate that we had conservatively 6 or 8 guys that were under 550. And, you know, I was close. Doug Burden was close. Porter Collins was close. Don Smith was close. Like, there was a number of guys, like, there was a lot of juice there. Like, it was amazing. Like, that erg day was just incredible when we did our 2K. And it was amazing, you know? And like when I didn't go under 550, like I didn't think I was going to go under 550, but like I was like, fuck, man, I'm not going to make the 8. Like I was scared for my life because like I was, 195, but going like 551 or whatever, but I wasn't under 550. It was crazy. It was unbelievable. And yet I was like winning a lot of the pair stuff on the water and everything. But like I was like scared for my life. Like I'm like, holy shit, like I gotta up my game, So yeah, it was awesome. It was awesome. But I mean, at the time it was scary as hell, but it was super cool. Like to see these guys that were like, Ted Murphy and, Jamie and a lot of these guys that were just freaking crushing it. It was awesome. And that was a huge jump as far as ERG scores and stuff, I think, for US rowing in a lot of respects,
No, and I think that's just tying into like that. Yes, there are more athletes that go sub 550 now, and there's even high school students that can pop that off from now and then. I think those are earlier bloomers, like that the traditional field sports used to pick up. But I think really to know that you guys set that standard where that is still what it takes to have these 8s go that fast. And, can you take us a little bit into like on the way to Atlanta, what it was like to like go to those world championships and win those medals and set those records and how it led you into because I think the other part that's really fun about this, Fred, is, here we are again 2 years out from another US hosted Olympics, and that's a different vibe going into that, I got to imagine.
Absolutely.
And I'd love to just kind of go through each of those world championships and get us into that camp setting and, put us what it took to get into that 8, especially since you're telling us you were scared that you weren't going to be in it.
Well, like, I mean, as you guys know, like every year's different, and like you have to be on every year. Like, I mean, it doesn't matter if it's high school or college or national team. Like if you're not on, like you're running the risk of not being there, and that's what's, I don't want to say tough, but that's what you have to be, everything has to go right for you. And in order to make it, and not just you as an individual, but just the team as a whole. Right. And so like the 93, like we were all really new and green. And I mean, Tom Murray was the only guy who had been to the world championships before in 91. And, we went out in 93 and we won the heat. Like we drew the Germans in the heat and we beat them solidly. Like we friggin' took it to them,
That's a first unified Germany too at that point, right?
Correct. And I mean, and Roland Barr was their stroke seat, and they had a bunch of guys that were like, had a lot of experience and stuff, but we took them to task. Like we went after them and stuff, but then there was all this like hype and oh, you're going to win. And, and so like it being newbies into the whole thing, and those guys having been in it before, like they had a little bit up their sleeve and stuff like that. It's not winning the heat, it's winning the final, as we all know. And so like, we took the bronze that year, and we learned a lot of lessons, I think, as a group. And then 94 was a, I think 93 for me was a really phenomenal year because the guys who were in that boat, like we're all still really tight because it was our first national team, and just a lot of really great memories and stuff like that. 94 was just basically like, it was a culmination of like, okay, you got us last year, we're going to get you this year, and each race, like we didn't win everything. Like we won Henley. Well, we went to Duisburg first, and we were
second behind Romania, but like it was sort of and I don't want to say ragtag because that's not the right term, but like it was who we had at the time, and it was one of the best races of my life as far as like we just threw it all out there and it was just phenomenal. And then Henley we won. Lucerne we had a really good race against Germany, and I think we lost by like maybe 2 or 3 seats. And then we went to the Goodwill games. They beat us in the at that time it was like a 500 and then 1,000. And so we lost the 500, but then we won the 1,000, and then we changed our training around a little bit and did a lot of high rate stuff. And that's when we were rating we basically rode to the 500. We were at like 48, 49. And, we had we had over a length at 1,000 meters and kept it. And then the Dutch came back in the last 500 and stuff.
Sneaky Dutch.
What?
Sneaky Dutch.
I hate the Dutch.
There's
It's
two
like
things
that-
I can't
it's like
stand.
that
Two things
Austin
I can't
Powers.
stand. Two things I can't
it's
stand.
the Austin
Social
Powers.
intolerance
Yeah.
and the Dutch.
People who are intolerant of other people's cultures and the Dutch. And then 95 was a rough year as far as we had made some change. Like some people had really come in on training. Adam Holland was one of them and stuff, and he didn't really jibe with the 8 as much. And I don't really want to point out, I did, but it was like we just didn't gel as a group. And then we didn't even make the final in Lucerne. We were in the B final, and in Spracklin, it was so funny. Spracklin left to go to some fundraising thing back in the United States, and we went to Oberaggery where we would train. And I think his parting words were, because we had like 5 or 6 weeks before the World Championships, and his parting words to us were basically like, "You guys better be ready because things are going to really get mixed up." And everybody just was like, "Holy shit," And sure enough, and that's when we more or less went back to the same 8 as 94, except for Chip McKibben was not in it and Mike Peterson was in it. And we ended up, and that I think that race for us was not great because the conditions were and I don't want to blame conditions, but for us, like we had changed our race strategy, and in that race, like every move that we were about to make is when we had like somebody would catch water because the conditions were so bad. And so we had our first move, and then we had our next move. And like, as we were getting ready for we were right in the fight. And then right as we were getting into that first move, it went down to port a little bit, guys caught water and stuff like that. And it sort of threw off the rhythm and everything. And then we got it back, and that we were still in it. And I remember Steve saying, "We're still in it. We're still in it. We're fine. We're going to be fine. Let's get them on the next one." And you could just sort of feel the vibration of it's going to happen. And then sure enough, like as soon as we were getting ready for our next big move, we hit water again and sort of had a little bit of a bobble, and that was it. And that was game day. And so I think in a lot of ways that sort of set us up for the 96 debacle, in that when we got into 96, into the training camp, everybody sort of got into their own little silo, and it was basically like a win or go home type of situation, if that makes sense. It was 96 was brutal. Like it was a brutal time. And I don't want to say friendships were broken because that didn't happen. But at the time it was really rough because there was a lot of people, and, like Ted Murphy and Porter, like really came on strong and did really well. But it was basically like, we didn't have that same sort of mojo going into 96, that we had, like, especially in 94 and in 95. Like, I felt 95, we were faster than we were in 94 for sure.
So just sounds super, for lack of a better word, just sounds cutthroat, right? Going into 96. But we've had a lot of guests on the show, as we alluded to earlier. There is something, I'll use another word that may not be the appropriate word, but there is something kind of like, there's, I don't want to call it finality, but there's certainly this marker in time of like, it's not just another world championship. We talked about it a couple minutes ago. Like, this is a home soil Olympic selection. Can you talk briefly on what it was like, despite all the drama and, psychopathic behavior to kind of beat out your friend to make the boat, which we've heard about a lot on the show. But more so of like making the boat for an Olympic Games, right? And like, again, I think I'm going back a little bit to where you drove across the country with no money in your pocket and just said, I'm going to figure it out and we'll see how far this goes. And now all of a sudden you're like competing to go to the Olympic Games. Like, I'd love to hear kind of, that bit.
And Justin, I think that's a great question, and it's a good segue into like the next couple years.
Sure.
Because the Olympics in your home country is a completely different animal.
Yeah.
And I mean, and speaking from experience, like, when it's in your home country, more people go and more friends go, and there's more attention to like the hometown hero, quote unquote, component. And we as a group, and I'm speaking for myself, but I mean, I know a few other guys too, but it's like, we weren't ready for that.
Got it.
We weren't ready for it being on home waters. Like, it's a completely different animal. Like, I mean, and other guys, I mean, Dan and well, pretty much all of you can talk to that a little bit more, based upon your experience. But from my experience, like, when it's in your home country, it is, like, when I would compete overseas, my parents would go.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. At the World Championships in 94, like, my brother and my sister-in-law, they came out, and my aunt and uncle, and, a few friends and stuff like that, but not really a lot. But like at the Olympics, it was like, I had a lot of guys that I trained with at Orange Coast College and at Berkeley, and, all along the way and stuff. And,
and they're asking you for tickets and the hookup and
I mean, and it is, and it's like, and your parents are like, oh, we're going to stay here. Is that close to where you are? And like, I just remember in 96, like, they had this, U.S. Rowing put on this, and again, like, I don't want to bash U.S. Rowing. I mean, they had to do what they had to do, right? But like, they put together this whole like event thing, and, that we all had to go to and put our polos on and all that shit. And it was just like, and everybody's like, oh, you guys are going to do so well. And, oh, how's it going to go? And, and it was just like, there was so much pressure, and just, even just like, like, if a newspaper had any sort of tie to you, or a, college or whatever, like, everybody was asking you questions, and you like, we as a group, we were a young group. We weren't ready for that. Like, well, I don't want to say we weren't. I wasn't ready for that. And I can only imagine that a few other guys, like, we weren't ready for that. And, you know, I remember getting called, like, we're like, oh, hey, we need to go down to NBC because, Steve Sagaloff and I were going down to do an interview at I'm sorry, my light's all screwed up.
You're fine. You're fine. You're fine.
But like, and I think, like, and just, going back to our first, my first comment about, like, how history sort of helps along the way, like Tom Terhar, for as much, like, having worked with him when I was a team manager and stuff, like, he wouldn't let his athletes go out and talk to the media, until the race was over. And I think he learned that from, because he was the assistant coach with Hartmut during that time. And he learned a lot about that because he saw, like, how it really divided the team in a lot of ways. Like, why is this person getting to go do an interview when that person isn't? Or, because it's a team sport, and, rowing is not about one person. It's about the cohesiveness of it and stuff. And as much as, like, for me, like, I'd be like, yeah, I could give a shit. In a way, like, yeah, I sort of give a shit, like, why is that guy getting to go downtown and do this when I can't, like, I'm just as important as that person and stuff, and so, like, I think, like, the home Olympics for me was opening ceremonies, best fucking night of my life. Like, it was amazing watching Muhammad Ali light the flame, unbelievable. And, and it was great. But I think being on home waters and stuff is really challenging, and balancing that is a really tough, it's a tough nut. It really is.
Would you delineate, if there's a delineation to be made? Would you delineate? I said, would you delineate, if there's a delineation to be made? The distraction.
Hey, Justin, I'm a junior college guy. What is delineate?
Would you say that? You did graduate.
You walked into that. You walked into that.
So would you separate the distraction of all the yeah, Luke's cracking up. The one who went the guy who graduated from Cambridge just cracking up. But no, but would you say that, like, there was the pressure was more sort of like, there's so much noise. There's just so much noise when it's just like, all I want to do is just row, versus the pressure of, it's on Lake Lanier. It's here. It's ours. Like, oh my God, we will be these national heroes. And, like, there's so much shit that we got to just go perform and have the fucking race of our life. Like, because it's US, like, USA, everybody's going to chant USA. We're not in, a different country. Like, so do you think that those were equal weighted, or do you think that it was just a combination of all of it? Or, yeah.
It was a sum of all. Yeah. It was a sum of all parts, okay. And I think, like, it becomes a culmination of, the 4 years. Mike Tatey said it best. It's like, it comes every 4 years. It's special. Yeah. It's for every 4 years. And right. And, like, your family's there and stuff, and everything. And, like, like in your interview with Akil, when he was talking about not making the Olympic team in 2000 and stuff, and just having to face your parents and stuff. Like, I mean, I remember seeing my parents, because they were on, the side of the course. And I remember just going up and just, I broke down into tears. Like, I was just like, I felt like I had let them down, and which I didn't. Like, they were proud and happy that I was there and stuff. But it was like, we had medaled the 3 years leading up to it.
and, set world records and done all this stuff. And like, there was a lot of expectation, and not just, and the thing is, it's like, like the women's aid had the same sort of thing that happened to them. My wife was on that team. Like, they had set the world record in Lucerne, and they ended up fourth. It was a bummer, like, for us, but like, you have to look at the sum of all parts. Like, actually, the year was actually at the Olympics was actually really good. Like, the lightweights did well. The men's quad did really well. The women's pair did really well. Like, there was a lot of medals there that happened. And so it wasn't like a complete failure. It was just, on the men's side, it was the men's 8 was why Spracklin was brought down here to win a medal. And that's what he sort of kept, our goal is to win a gold medal at the Olympics. Our goal is to win a gold medal at the Olympics. And at the start, like at the starting line, like, I was ready. Like, people will say, like, people will argue that we were overtrained, or we were, this or that or whatever. We weren't overtrained. We just didn't execute. We choked. And that was, and that was unfortunate, so you live with it.
Fred, I really appreciate that you're being so honest and bringing us into that moment of pressure, bringing us into that moment of, I think it's hard not to be an Olympian and see anything but winning as a failure, right? That's why you play the game at that level. I always think of the Man in the Arena poem, though. It's like, only you can feel bad about not winning the Olympics, and the reality is, like, your cohort is a big reason why I'm an Olympian. Sitting on the couch as a high school kid, and literally it's the middle of summer, and you turn on the TV, and there was this sport that nobody really knew about in Norwalk, Connecticut, that I was doing by myself, no one else in my high school. And when my high school friends looked at the TV and said, "Hey, isn't that dumb sport that you do?" And I looked at him and said, "No, that's what I'm going to do." And I think that's really just like a way of saying, like, thank you for not only being there in that moment on that race course wearing the red, white, and blue to inspire a young kid from Norwalk, Connecticut, that he too could be an Olympian, to bringing the audience into, like, there are all of these factors. There's so much that goes on. I even think about the way you described Tom Tehar as, like, I think that's great. Obviously, those women were undefeated for 11 years. Like, I think that's the longest sports legacy ever. But at the same time,
before you get too far, talking about his generation, Fred, and his generation inspiring us. Fred, I'm pretty sure you were there. If not, I'm making it up and I'm putting you there. But I was a junior at the San Diego Rowing Club, and Aaron Pollock was our coach, and you and I think Bob Kaler and Jeff Klepacki, and who else was there? There was a fourth, and I can't
Probably
place
Don.
it. I think it might have been Don. And you guys came, and we're sitting there on the tarmac, all of us, men's, women's team, all this junior program, and you guys are just talking to us about becoming Olympians and what it is that you guys were doing and all this stuff. And I mean, that's the direct inspiration. And I remember in 1999, I made the Pan American Games camp, and I think Garrett Miller had something was going on with his shoulder, so he was out for the day. And for whatever reason, Tatey plucked me out of the Pan Am camp, and he threw me into the mix with those guys and dropped me into 7th seat right in front of Klepacki. And I am so glad I did not do my idiot, because I thought I was pretty funny back then, but I was about to turn around and be like, "Hey Jeff, guess what? You were right. Here I am." And I decided against it. I just shut my mouth and I rode, and that was my day there. But no, I mean, to Dan's point, this stuff sits with us because you guys were and are the generation that inspired our group, and had us thinking, wow, this would be something. And Dan, to your point, watching it on TV, I was part of the first Canamex group, the Canada, America, Mexico junior group that got together for that trifecta of racing. And we were down in Mexico City and we were watching the games on TV. And that was my first international experience rowing, watching you guys on the television. Like, it was all just sort of this thing. And it was a huge, huge part of an eye-opening experience for me in terms of, wow, this is, I want to do this.
Yeah.
I want to do this. So, I'm not sure you and I have ever talked about that. I'm glad we get to talk about it now, but thank you in the sense that you and your group inspired. Dan will tell you, I'll tell you, Winners, McGee, all these guys that we were all coming up through the junior program and going to college at the same time. Like, you were our guys. You gave us that hope and inspiration for what we might be able to do in our time. So thank you for that.
Well, no, that's awesome to hear. And I mean, like, and I think, for as much as Mike was a polarizing person in the rowing world, there was an element, like, he always allowed us to have the time to go and do like the reach out stuff. Like, you couldn't miss practice because you were sick, but you could miss practice because you were going out, and I say that tongue in cheek, but it's like you could miss practice because it was you were going out to reach out. Like, I mean, we did do a number of things. Like, I do remember going up, like, we were flown up to Los Gatos, and we, Chip McKibben and I did a little talk up there and stuff like that, and a couple other things and stuff. But like, it was always sort of timed and everything, but it was a very important part for us to sort of like, to make sure that we were grounded with where we came from, like who we were and who we came from. And that was huge. And it was great, and I think that, like, going back to your point, Justin, like, or your question and stuff, like, when it's in the United States, like the Olympics are in the United States, like, yes, it would have been our medal, but like, we were doing it for the US. Like, that's what we were, and that was a lot of pressure that we weren't ready for, I don't think. And it just, because I mean, we flew in the heat. We had an unbelievable heat, and we went straight through to the final, and we beat the Germans, who were ended up being second and stuff like that. I like to say that we were undefeated in heats and semis and stuff like that. It's just the final was our little loophole and stuff like that. So yeah. No, but I mean, like, the point is, like, I think, like, what you guys are doing with the podcast and stuff is really important, especially moving forward, and especially getting it out to the younger people, like, to go back, like, most people, like, and I'm sure you guys were in the same boat, like, I was 122 pounds, 123 pounds, or whatever it was. And it was like, am I really going to go to the Olympics in this sport? Like, there's no friggin' way, but like, I like being around, I like being around the team, and I like to train, and I like to push myself. And then it was sort of like, it was like that whole baby step thing, like, just keep it moving up just a little bit more and stuff like that. Like, it wasn't really until my senior year in college, like, I was always the backup guy in, high school, and, my freshman year in particular, like, this guy, Sean Carver, like, he had a scar on his neck from a bike injury, and, he was the badass. And I'm just like, I just want to be with this guy. This guy's awesome, and I just want to row with this guy, and the other guys in the boat and stuff. So yeah, it's a great sport, and it's been really, really good to me. And I'm really blessed. I mean, I hate saying blessed, but I really am. Like, it's been fun. And to know you guys, like, to, see you guys, like, see what you guys did. I remember looking at when I was coaching at Washington, and Steve was basically like off the books because I couldn't recruit him to Washington because he was already gone, and freaking pain in my ass. And then I was at Cal when Luke was at Berkeley, his freshman year and stuff. And then who knows what the hell Dan was doing.
Nobody
no
knows.
matter
Nobody
what,
knows what
no
I'm
matter
doing.
what the weather
And
was.
Justin,
it
you
could be
were just
cold.
Justin, you were just unfortunate that you were at a time where people weren't really recruiting coxswains, right?
Oh, I got recruited. Buzz recruited me, and then I got to row with Dan. So it worked out.
Well,
So, yeah.
I guess I screwed up.
That's
screwed
okay.
up.
I mean, I was probably one of 100,000 that got recruited, but sure. Yeah, it worked out.
Hey.
So Fred, coming back, finish the story off, right? It's been an awesome trip down memory lane, right? One final question, right? Icing a cherry on top. If you could go back at any point in this journey and coach yourself, where would it be and what would you say?
Wow. Well, that's a great question. And I know and it just popped into my head. Matt Deacon, who I coached at Washington, he said at the start of their race in 2004, Brian Volpenheim turned around and basically said to the boat, or, however, like with the microphone or whatever, and basically just said, it's just another race or just another piece. And what Matt relayed to me was that just calmed him at that time before their go in 2004. And so, like, I wish I had the wherewithal to be that kind of guy in order to say that to the guys, behind me who I knew and I trusted and wanted to go down the course with. Because I think in a lot of respects, that's what it comes down to, is just like going, hey, it's nothing different. It's just another race, or it's just another piece. So, like, let's not swing for the fence. Let's just do what we know how to do. Because I think that I think in a lot of respects, that's what we did in 96. We swung for the fence. It was the 9th inning. Bases were loaded. We needed 1 run, or we needed 5 or 4 runs. And we swung for the fence. And all we needed to do was just do what we knew what we needed to do. So, I mean, that's the thing for me that I really, with hindsight, I really wish I had the ability to go back and do again. So, yeah. But, that's the great thing about rowing too, is that you only get one shot. And if you don't do it right, you'll always be the person. Yeah, that's the thing about rowing, like being an Olympian. And for me, it sucks. And I never really talked about it a lot, because you'd go into these conversations and people would find out that you were an Olympian, and they go, oh, you were an Olympian. That's so awesome. What's the next question you get?
Did you medal? And then did you win?
Yep.
I mean, they don't know the whole backstory of being a world champion and of being whatever. It's like their finite moment is, did you win a medal at the Olympics? And I think in a lot of respects, that isn't the whole story of the thing, So.
But now they know.
That's what?
but now they know.
No, yeah. So, but that I mean, it was a great question, Steve, because that really what Matt said to me really resonated, and it was like, shit, we just didn't have that one person that just said, hey, let's just freaking do what we know what to do. You know, we don't have to swing for the fence. We just need to just freaking do what we're capable of. So,
Well, Uncle Fred, I mean,
nephew Dan,
your contribution to rowing is still ongoing and endless, and from inspiring a lot of us when we were young to being there for us as the team manager, to supporting crews now, right, to make sure that they have competitive equipment. And I think that it's the fact that you were a fan of the show and went through the portal, it just means a lot to all of us. And I think that if anything, your worst day is a bad day at the Olympics, right?
pretty much, yeah.
So just remember that. Just,
I wish we could hug right now,
we'll see each other. But you are welcome anytime. And I think the last thing we ask is inspire us once more. Who do you think we should have on next?
Oh, geez, I don't know.
Well, you can tell us. You know how to you can know how to reach us if you email us at @mettlefactory.com. We'll get back to you in about 2 or 3 months.
Well, exactly. No, I think what you guys are doing is a really is a powerful medium, and I think there's a number of athletes that would be awesome to have come on and sort of share.
I love you. You better say your wife, or else you're dead.
No, I think Annie would be an amazing person to have on. I mean, she was she won 5 medals in 3 years. She doubled up 2 years and stuff, and she had a really good insight to Hartmut and what she was doing then. And I think there's any number of people that could really get on you guys' show and really sort of explain, from our generation of like what we were doing. What Hartmut, when I was, sorry, I'm sort of tripping over my tongue, but at that time you had, this British coach who was friggin' nuts. You had an East German coach who was friggin' nuts. And you had a Russian coach who was completely nuts. I mean, and what we all were doing, the women's team would look at us and going, God, you guys are what you guys are doing is nuts. And then we'd look at what they were doing. Like one of her workouts or one of the women's team's workouts, they would do an erg, one of their erg workouts was like at steady state. Like they would do it like 3 or 4 times a week. Was like they would do like 40 minutes or maybe 50 minutes, 40 minutes, 30 minutes, 20 minutes, 10 minutes of steady state. And then the Olympic year, they were doing they would go, the number of jumpies that they were doing was just ridiculous, and, people talk about, and then like Igor and what Igor was doing with the scullers at that time was friggin' unbelievable. And, and then here Spracklin was having us work out like 3 to 4 times a day as well. All of them was just like more volume, and I think Akil said it in his, when he was talking with you guys, it was about how much volume, oh, he loved the Americans because they would you'd say, okay, you're going to do this. And they would just do it. They wouldn't go off and smoke cigarettes in the bushes or whatever, and we would. I mean,
my whole, or, with Spracklin, like everything was about competition. And we would, especially with Jamie Coven, like we'd compete in friggin' everything. To which we got a deal with Bausch and Lomb, and so we got contact lenses, And so like we're in our house and there was like 3 or 4 of us that had contact lenses, and we would race to see, the first time you get contact lenses, we would race to see who could get their contact lenses in first. And so guys would be like poking their eyes, and you hear like, in different bathrooms, like, fuck, and like they're poking their eyes and doing stuff and everything like that. Like we competed in everything. Like it was super fun, but it was stupid, It's just like we competed in everything. It was all, but that's just the way the Americans are, we're sort of bred that way. And that's what, that's what could make it either like really good or, being able to sort of go, no, I need a day off or whatever. And we just didn't know how to give ourselves days off. Like you didn't want to miss practice. You didn't. And I think that's sort of along the line of every, like the Scullers, the women's team and the men's team at that time. Like we did not want a day off, because if you had a day off, like you didn't know if somebody was going to get just a little bit faster than you, and you didn't want to give that inch up at all. And maybe that was a problem, but I wasn't willing to risk it. And I think a lot of people weren't really willing to risk it at all. So
can't have my seat if I'm in it.
Yeah. Well, Fred,
I think Annie would be good. I think either Eric Mueller or this God, and I'm so, this is so horrible. I can't remember his name right now. The stroke of the quad. Not Brian Jameson. God, that's fucking horrible.
Tim?
No, not Tim. Tim was Bow. God, that's horrible.
It'll come to you like
we will
at
have
midnight.
our Mettle Factory research minion AI.
No,
pull it up for us.
I think Annie would be really good. I think this. Damn it, that's so horrible. He's such a good guy. Because he was part of the sculling group from the beginning, and they did a fabulous job of those guys endured a lot with Igor, and for people to hear like what Igor had them doing and stuff.
Tim Young, Brian Jameson, Eric Mueller, and Jason Gales.
Jason Gales. Jason, yeah, he's awesome. Yeah. Brian Jameson too, but yeah, have this horrible story. Do we have time, or should I go?
Yeah, no, we have time.
Eric Mueller. So Eric Mueller, who I absolutely love, right? So we had this champion challenge thing that we would do. So after the World Championships, we'd go to this champion paper thing, and we'd go and stuff like that. And after the Olympics, Eric Mueller, they had, the scullers all had to bring their own oars. Like the sweep guys didn't, but the scullers did for whatever reason and stuff. And I'm like literally right behind him at the United desk as they're getting ready to, we're moving on, and we were partying, so we're pretty hungover and stuff. And so the woman behind the kiosk was like, well, those are going to cost you like whatever it was, $150 because they're oversized and stuff like that. And Eric goes, oh, ma'am, like I flew down here with him. I was on the Olympic team, and like we're doing this thing, and he's very soft spoken and all this other kind of stuff. And the woman's like, well, I'm really sorry, and she was sort of being a bitch, and she was like, no, I got to charge you whatever it was and stuff. And we were all poor, and she's like, and and I don't remember exactly, but it was sort of, she goes, well, yeah, you were at the Olympics, right? You know, sort of whatever. And Eric goes, yeah. And I fucking won a silver medal. And he slams it, like he pulls it out of his pocket and slams it on the, like in front of her, and goes, and I want a fucking silver medal. So yeah, I fucking think I deserve it, you know, to ship these things for free. And I'm behind him going, fuck yeah, Eric. Yeah. You got fucking. It was the best. It was awesome.
Oh my God. That's so good.
Yeah, it was the best. But thank you. I know. Sorry, guys.
No worries.
No,
worries.
this is
No,
Fred. This is awesome.
Thank you for taking us down all the different avenues of your story. Appreciate you sharing with us. Obviously, to Dan's point, you're welcome back anytime. You know, obviously appreciate the depth and breadth of what you kind of told us about, you know, the training and the journey. But also appreciate that, you know, you remembered the idea of a take a well day, right, instead of a sick day. And
yeah, exactly.
That goes a long way too. So I'm gonna keep that one with me in my management repertoire. But
it was the best and worst advice I ever got.
Yeah, and we'll debate about what delineation means over time.
Yeah.
But appreciate you having the time to chat with us. And
thank you, Uncle Fred.
We'll be better on the inbox.
Thank you guys all so much.
That's all for today's show. Fast Friends is a Metal Factory production. All opinions expressed are our own and those of our guests. If you like our show, follow along or subscribe with us wherever you get your content and podcasts. Thanks for listening.